What's up, YouTube? Doing a little voiceover league. It's actually the league we played yesterday on stream, but it's honestly easier to just do a voiceover of the one specific league than try to go back and cut out part of the VOD, especially because chat starts getting a little wonky in the recording. So instead, I'm just going to go through the voiceover of the league, show off some of the Grixis Shadow gameplay from yesterday. If you didn't catch the live stream at twitch.tv/the_control freak, link will be down below to the Twitch channel, as well as the deck list and the Discord if you want to come ask any questions. This is the list that I ran through with. Not a whole lot to say about the main deck. It's I think for the most part, regardless of what your specific flex spots are, the main deck is probably like less than 5 cards off of anybody else's list. 3 or 4 Ledger Shredder, 2 or 3 Underworld Breach, 4 Drown, 4 Iteration, 1 or 0 Terminates, 3 or 4 Bolt, 2 to 4 Unholy Heat, 4 Ragavan, 4 Channeler, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Shadow, 4 Bauble, 18, 19, 20 lands, maybe a Croxa. Not too much to say about that. In the sideboard, I changed things up a little bit. I'm very, very counter heavy in my sideboard, mainly because I moved the Spell Pierces out of the main for a couple extra copies of Underworld Breach. This main deck is based off of a top 4 challenge list from this past weekend. I had the name in front of me for a second ago, but I don't have it at the moment, but I'll give him a shout out down below. Sideboard, though, I upped the counter spells for me specifically, like the 3 Pierce, 2 Flusterstorm, 2 Mystical Dispute, mainly so I have extra ways of interacting with like early Planeswalkers against decks like Creativity. Want to make sure I've got a counter spell in hand against like Living End, Rhinos, some of the Cascade stuff. And then Mystical Dispute I've found is a nice little helping piece against Murktide. Hits Ledger Shredder, Expressive Iteration, Murktide itself, Archmage's Charm, Counterspell, Spell Pierce, Spell Snare, Minor Misstep. Also good against decks with like Teferi, Omnath, that kind of stuff. Expressive Iteration, Ice Fang Quaddle. I personally like it more than Spell Snare, because I think a lot of the things that like Spell Snare answers are either A, 2-mana creatures that you really don't care about, like Tarmogoyf, Territorial Kavu, Ledger Shredder, those kind of things. You have a lot of answers for just in the main deck. And a lot of the 2-mana spells, I think Spell Snare misses the ones that you care about the most. Or Spell Snare misses the spells you care about the most that aren't obviously 2 mana. So like Teferi, really bad card to miss. Unholy Heat against Murktide, Archmage's Charm, Blood Moon, against a lot of the like 4 or 5 color pile decks, misses Leyline Binding, misses Prismatic Ending on 1. What's it called? Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Creativity, against Hammer Time, misses Sigarda's Aid, Hammer, Shadow Spear. What else? Hits Sanctifier. But I think it misses too many spells for me to like really want to devote a spot or multiple spots to it. But if you leave a comment down below, let me know what I'm not thinking about with Spell Snare. If you're running it and it's impressed you and you really like the card, please let me know like what it is about the card that's really speaking to you. But otherwise, up on the counters, 2 Dress Downs, an Alpine Moon, K-Command, 2 Terminates. Added in the Emrakul because they did just for the mill matchup. I really don't think this is that necessary, especially if you're like me going heavy up on counter spells that are all good against mill. But I couldn't really think of anything I wanted to test, so I figured I would just throw it in there, see what happened. But let's go ahead and just jump into the games. I'm sure there's much better options than Emrakul, but that's where we're at. All right, so round number 1. We are on the draw. Opponents revealed no companion. Pretty decent opening hand. Like, we don't have a threat, but I really can't mulligan a hand of just like interaction, hand disruption, expressive iteration, functional mana. Like, you're throwing away this for the chance at this with one less card. Obviously, I would prefer to have a threat, but sometimes it's just not in the cards. So Steam Vents, Dragon's Rage Channeler, assuming just stock Murktide. Gonna lead off on Thoughtseize. I could bolt the Channeler to try to stop like a Surveil trigger, but if I can take like an answer or take a follow-up threat, then this bolt gets a lot better. And we see Consider, Iteration, Murktide, Unholy Heat. So they can't stop the Lightning Bolt at the moment, so I'm pretty inclined to just take the big payoff threat. Then hopefully if I can bolt this Dragon's Rage Channeler, I can kind of regain some momentum. They do not find Delirium, but they do find a Ragavan. All ourselves, see it terminate. I could pass a turn and terminate on their turn or bolt on their turn, but there's always the chance that they drew into a Spell Pierce or a counter spell, and I really just don't want to risk that. But we'll keep the terminate, so it gives us a guaranteed answer to this Dragon's Rage Channeler, again, assuming they didn't draw like a counter spell, but they just find a second Ragavan. All right. Shadow's a good pickup, so let's go ahead and guess we probably we knew about Unholy Heat. That's why we didn't play the Shadow. We knew they had an Unholy Heat in hand, so there's not really a reason to risk this Shadow. And picking up an Unholy Heat of our own is really good. So I'm passing the turn here because I want them to fetch or to put something on the stack, and then I can Unholy Heat. The reason being is if I go to Unholy Heat and they have a counter spell, it's really bad. If I go to Unholy Heat and they have a Spell Pierce, I can pay for it. They fetch up a Watery Grave, which we saw them bin a Drown in the Loch earlier, so it's like blue-red Murktide, splashing black for at least Unholy Heat, possibly something else. Second Shadow is very good. So they're going to counter my expressive iteration. Okay. Then steal my Shadow. Steal my Shadow into double Unholy Heat. So I can't fetch and shock, or I'm just dead to their Shadow. And top deck a land. So on to game 2. Sideboarding against Murktide in this build especially. I've got a bunch of like Spell Pierces, Mystical Disputes to bring in. Brought in the 2 Terminates, boarded out some Thoughtseizes, Drown in the Locks, or a couple Drowns, kept a couple in, and a Ragavan. So the last card I brought in was Kolaghan's Command. So brought in 2 Spell Pierce, 2 Mystical Dispute, 1 Kolaghan's Command, 2 Terminate, for 4 Thoughtseize, 2 Drowns, and a Ragavan. Ragavan just because they have a ton of ways to answer it. I didn't see Ledger Shredder game 1, so maybe that's the card that they cut for Drown in the Loch. I don't actually know yet, so we'll just kind of wait and see. Either way, good opening hand, a lot of solid removal. We've got Ragavan, Bobble, fetch land, so we can potentially get Delirium as early as turn 2 if they happen to like kill our Ragavan or give us a heat target. Not playing out the Bobble to give myself a chance to draw into a Ledger Shredder or a Dragon's Rage Channeler. Like, I'm not really... I know that I'm playing the Ragavan there turn 1, so if I know I'm fetching anyway, there's not really a reason to Bobble myself. I can wait on that decision, especially since I don't really know what I'm looking for yet. Take the Channeler, give myself a second threat. And them not having the answer for the Ragavan turn 1 is kind of curious. It's like, especially with Flame Slash, you expect them to have a pretty high number of 1-mana interactive pieces. Kind of the downside here of being very reactive is I don't have a good way of enabling Dragon's Rage Channeler. This is like the negative aspect of Unholy Heat is it's just not a card you can like fire off too proactively. That being said, I could Unholy Heat my Channeler if I see land, Bobble, or creature, keep it on top. Or if I see a land, Bobble, creature, I can throw it in the graveyard, let the Unholy Heat resolve, goes to the graveyard, puts 2 damage on the Channeler. Channeler becomes a 3/3 because the instant adds Delirium. So I could increase the clock that way, but I really don't want to just like blow an Unholy Heat for nothing. Really expecting a Spell Pierce there, but looks like they're just planning on killing the Channeler, so that's fine. Let's get Shadow down. In situations like this, you might see me tap like a non-swamp, and that's basically just a little bit of respect for Blood Moon. Like, I think there's a possibility I might have a situation where my opponent resolves a Blood Moon and then like has a follow-up, and I might want access to terminate on their turn. So that's just me saying, hey, I'm going to keep the swamp up so that I've got terminate through a Blood Moon right here. May Archmage's Charm choose to draw instead of steal my shadow. So we'll dash in a Ragavan. Okay. Another Flame Slash. That's 3 Flame Slashes and an Unholy Heat. Flame Slash is a really cool addition, honestly. Like, it kills Channeler, Ragavan on 1. Kills like every 1-drop out of most other decks. Also kills Ledger Shredder plus like Bobble on 2. So I really actually like that addition as a piece of sideboard tech. I don't know how necessary 3 or more of them are, but I think it's a cool piece. All right, so Drown in the Loch, really, really excellent pickup. Now we can kind of protect Giganta. Just try to get across the finish line that way. Ledger Shredder can resolve because we've got plenty of removal spells for it. So we'll let them resolve this trigger, see what happens. I could counter the drown before they resolve the Ledger Shredder trigger. But honestly, I feel like it's more important for them to find a threat than it is to find a counter spell. So there's always the chance that they like have a counter spell in hand, find a threat, ditch the counter spell to keep the threat because they think they're killing the Giganta. When in reality, like I would much rather them have the threat. So I think I'm okay, like letting them have that trigger, that connive trigger there. If they already had a counterspell, they'd have a counterspell after the trigger resolves if they wanted to have a counterspell. But I just think that there's a better chance they don't want a counterspell. There's always a chance they have nothing, they draw into the counterspell, and that's better than nothing, but take the odds. Okay, so again, reasonable hand. I've got turn 1 interaction. Got Mystical Dispute and Drown to start kind of fighting over stuff. All right. So opponent passing with untapped Spiral Bluff Canal means there's like no chance that I'm ever just playing out this Ragavan on one. The odds of it dying are just so high. So we're just gonna pass with Scalding Tarn. Maybe if they put like a Ledger Shredder on the stack, I can Mystical Dispute. Does make my mana a little bit awkward because I'd have to get like a Steam Vents. But honestly, that's fine if I got to like get Steam Vents, Mystical Dispute, a Ledger Shredder, untap Island, dash Ragavan, have my mana that way. As long as I can cast like all this stuff, I don't really care about casting Drown at this moment. All right, so we find our black source anyway. Get Ragavan, pass the turn. Not sure why they're shocking. Now it makes sense. Opponent's got to Drown in the lock, and I don't think they realize yet that we have no cards in the graveyard. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what happened. I actually know that's what happened because our opponent came into the chat afterwards and said, "Oh, like Drown in the lock on one is just muscle memory," and it's like I get that completely. There's very few chances, especially in a kind of mirror match like this, where your opponent's going to have no cards in their graveyard. So it's just like second nature to say, oh yeah, I've got Drown in the Lock, you've got a 1-drop, it's turn 2, let me kill it. Okay, so I hit with the Ragavan and I flip over their Blood Moon. And I'm thinking here, I could maybe lock them out of the game. They've got no blue mana available if this Blood Moon resolves. I have no black, but I do have a Ragavan, and I've got my basic island. So I can play like Ledger Shredder, Iteration, Mystical Dispute, Unholy Heat. If Ragavan connects again, I can play the Drown in the Lock. And I really don't want to put a card in the graveyard because they obviously have a Drown in the Lock. So I feel like if I can just invalidate that, like, let's try. Let's see what happens. So we're going to put their Blood Moon on the stack. They've got an Archmage's Charm to steal my Ragavan. So I'm going to respond by Mystical Disputing the Archmage's Charm because, you know, I want my Ragavan. I don't want you to have my Ragavan. And resolve Blood Moon. So we've got blue. They've got only red. Crap. Like, immediate dash Ragavan. Okay, well, we've got answers to Ragavan. They drew Lightning Bolt for our Ragavan. So let's get down Ledger Shredder. Ledger Shredder eats a Spell Snare. So this is like worst case sequence for us. Them having Ragavan, Ragavan finding an answer to our Ragavan, the treasure mattering to make them the blue for Spell Snare. All right, so they've got a hearse. Pop out the graveyard. I really hate the way Magic Online, their interface works on replays with the graveyard. I know I've said it in videos before, but just watching it like pop open the video or pop open the graveyard and shift everything to the right is so annoying. So we're going to iteration. I'm adding Unholy Heat because I think at the moment it's more important for me to have an answer to Ragavan. And I think the fact that they didn't just like hard cast a second Ragavan if they had it last turn means they probably don't have another. So instead, we're going to go the Giganta route. Also, probably should have just tapped the blue and held up Unholy Heat, but I kind of want to represent that I've got something. And then now I feel like I'm kind of turning the corner a little bit. So I'm actually just going to attack with the Ragavan and hold up Drown. I think this is kind of a crucial turn cycle in that if I can just put myself in a position to like kind of pull ahead a little bit this turn, I feel like I'm in stable shape. So getting the Ragavan Connect in, getting to cast their expressive iteration. This is why Ragavan is like such an absurd Magic card. Like their Ragavan hit us, got our Lightning Bolt to kill our Ragavan under Blood Moon, make the treasure that allowed them to Spell Snare. Our Ragavan just dashed in, hit their expressive iteration, drew a card, drew two cards really off the top of their library because we got Shadow in hand and Channeler onto the field for a free card from them. Free card. Like, these are the kind of turns that I think put Ragavan in that discussion for needs to be banned. Doesn't need to be legal in the format. So we're just going to keep. All right. So opponent scoops for that dash Ragavan. That would have been get in for 8, make another treasure. And then this turn we would probably Thought Seize just to make sure the coast is kind of clear. But either way, really good match. I was very pleased with that one. All right. So this match I remember vividly. You'll see why. Opening hand's fine. We've got like a 1-drop. We can start filtering for a land. We've got decent interaction. Being on the draw is a little rough. Finding second land, however, is great. So I'm leading on Thoughtseize here because they played no companion Wooded Foothills. So I'm really expecting this to be a Wrenn and 6 deck. And I don't want to play out Channeler on turn 1, have my opponent get a Wrenn and down tick on it. I know I could Unholy Heat it afterwards, but that's just like really, really bad sequence of events for me. So I'd rather Thoughtseize and then like turn 2, Channeler, Bobble or something, or Hold Up Drown, whatever the case may be. But we see Shardless Agent, Double Fury, so we're going to go ahead and take the Shardless Agent. Now we get Channeler plus another Thoughtseize. Take a Fury. So their hand is a Fury and 3 lands against our now Delirium. Shardless Agent off the top for them. So this is like the one open turn that they had was right here to top deck a Cascade spell, and they did. Fortunately, we've got the answer to both the Rhinos, but it's still kind of that situation of like, man, you had to top deck the Rhinos in the one open turn. All right, so looking for lands. Not playing out the Shadow here because it's only a 4/4, so it would die to the Fury. But if my opponent decides to go for like the Fury on the Dragon's Rage Channeler, then we get to stop that. So I just want to point out right here that my opponent has got access to 5 mana. They don't have double red. I think they played out all the lands we know about. So we're kind of at this like stalemate point where they're winning the race. We do have a lot of good cards in our hand. They don't have 4 card types, or don't have 5 cards in their graveyard. So they can't, we can't Drown in the Lock the Fury yet, but we did pick up this Bolt, so now we can like Bolt the Shardless Agent and then Drown in the Lock the Fury. This play I don't get. My opponent has an Endurance. And they could have like Endurance in combat or something to try to eat the Channeler, but they don't. And then they Endurance themselves. And to me, at least, this play makes no sense whatsoever. Why Endurance yourself instead of me? Unless you're playing around exactly Drown in the Lock, but you don't even have a 5th card in the yard. So maybe you're playing around like Fetch, drawing a Fetch for a red source, having Fury, and it getting drowned. Like, maybe there's an argument there for that. I don't know. But Endurancing me just seems like it really doesn't do anything. Maybe they were doing it because of the Dead and Gone there. I don't know. So we're going to bolt down the Shardless Agent. You know, we got Ragavan off the top, so we can dash that in. And opponent just scoops it up. And I don't understand this scoop either. I mean, I guess looking back at it, it makes more sense since they don't have the second red source. And if they think they have to fetch and shock to cast the Fury, then it makes sense. But I still don't get the Endurance yourself play. But whatever. Go to game 2. If any Rhinos players have a more insightful opinion, I would love to know. Because it's not a deck that I'm super familiar with the lines of. And when I say the lines, I mean get to 3 mana, cast Cascade spell. Turn 4, cast Cascade spell. First hand was like a Channeler and a Bauble and 5 lands, so easy throwback. This hand a lot better. Throwing back the iteration because I think I'm just trying to get on the front foot here. So you could make the argument that I should have led on the fetch land turn 1 for the Channeler. But if I'd led on fetch land turn 1, I'd have to get a red source to play Channeler. I'm not getting a second Blood Crypt because I've got Ledger Shredder. So I'd have to get a Steam Vents. That wouldn't let me Thoughtseize plus Shadow on turn 2 anyway. So instead, I play the Blood Crypt for the Channeler so I can get second black source here to have Thoughtseize open. I also would not play the Shadow out on turn 2 regardless as a 1/1 because it runs the risk of my opponent having a what's it called? Fire and Ice or Prismari Command or whatever like that. Lead with the Ledger Shredder because if they cast a Cascade spell here, it's kind of fine by me. So they have a Blood Moon. Always fun. Blood Moon into Cascade spell. So we'll just do a lot of like clicking that doesn't matter here because for the most part it doesn't matter. My opponent's got a Blood Moon. We've got not the ability to play through Blood Moon. So be it. On to game 3. Oh, sideboarding against Rhinos before I forget. Boarding out a whole bunch of bolts. Breach, a couple Ragavan. I board out like 3 Ragavan on the draw and like 2 on the play. It's decent turn 1 on the play. On the draw, there's a lot of things that can kill it on turn 2, so it's a bit of a liability. Board out the Terminate because it just does a worse job than like Unholy Heat at killing Rhinos. And boarded in like the Spell Pierces, Flusterstorm, Mystical Disputes. All right, Field Giganta. Let's get that out of the way. So Shocking In, Dead and Gone, the Channeler, sure. Got Shredder, Bobble. I'm just going to discard this Underworld Breach. No, I'd discard the Heat. I thought I discarded the Breach. This Breach, discarding the Breach would have given me Delirium, and like I'm a ways off of this Unholy Heat anyway, so it's not like it matters too much. Let's get down Shadow, get a Connive trigger. All right, Spell Pierce, really good pickup. See a Drown in the Lock on top. Now I discard the Underworld Breach. Leyline Binding, a little annoying, but fine for the most part. Does play around Spell Pierce. Fury's a little bad for me. Then play Channeler, just hold up my counter spells. Second Leyline Binding. Okay. Then this is kind of that point where I'm just going to play Ragavan, hold up multiple counter spells. I could dash the Ragavan, but then I'm down to 1 counter. So this is that exact same situation as before where they could have Fury. I don't know if they do or not, but they Endurance, and this time they target me. And I thought this was really odd because game 1, they Endurance target themselves when I had Drown in the Lock in hand that cared about their graveyard. Game 3, they Endurance targeting me when I've got Unholy Heat and care about my graveyard. And I don't know if this is a coincidence thing. I just thought it was worth pointing out that, like, it's a little off. And then we hit their Blood Moon. I'm absolutely casting that because it locks them out of green mana. They do find Rhinos, unfortunately. So we're going to have a little bit of a draw-go contest. They don't have... All right, so Drown is able to take out a Rhino, so now we can start attacking through. Expressive Iteration finds another Drown for another Rhino. So we're going to Thoughtseize, make sure the coast is clear. Why did I not? Oh, because of Otawara. I didn't drown because of Otawara there. They would have just bounced my Gigantha, so I wanted to give them the chance to bounce, and then I could, like, kill the Rhino. But either way, kill Teferi, and they scoop. So on to a nice little 2-0 start. I'm going to go grab some water real quick. I will be right back. I know this is weird in the middle of a recording, but I am thirsty and getting, like, jumpy. All right, water obtained. Let's get back to match number 3. But yeah, I just thought it was kind of odd there that they had the exact same scenario come up in 2 different spots and made 2 different plays, with the difference on my side being what was in my hand. Now, a lot of people I think would just jump to, like, the stream sniping concern, so I'll take a a second to say I never assume anybody is stream sniping. There's coincidences all the time, but if that is the case, I accept responsibility for that. I'm choosing to stream. I'm choosing to promote myself and especially put like TTV in my gamer tag on Magic Online. I have no right to get upset for anybody if they are stream sniping because like I put myself in that position. I don't know what they're going through. I don't know how important the money for the league is, but like for me personally, I don't care if I win or lose as long as I'm learning something and getting to talk about the game. So that's my 2 cents. Leave it there. All right, so this is match number 3. Currently 2-0 opening hand. Not very good. We're ways off shadow. No blue mana. We don't really have much going on. We do have a bauble, but this is a lot more proactive. We've got threats. We've got baubles. Or a bauble. I think we throw one back. Yeah. All right. Blood Crypt, go. Blood Crypt, go. No companion. Dwarven Mine. Okay, so it's creativity. Let's get down Shredder. Get our bauble triggered. Bend the shadow. We're ways off of that. Then bend one of these expressive iterations to get Delirium going. I could bend the Terminate. It's not like great against creativity, but I kind of want to keep a piece of spot removal in case they have turn 4 Dwarven Mine creativity. And we're not breaching anytime soon. They have Fire the Ragavan plus a land. Okay. And then here I'm just going to like hold up interaction for like the rest of the game. Opponents miss land drops. So even though they don't have a fetch land in the yard, I just don't want them to have access to a Wrenn and 6. Get a basic and Thoughtseize. So a little bit about the sequencing here. I get the basic instead of a fetch land because if I go fetch, shock, Thoughtseize, I go down to 6, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, go down to 6. For Thoughtseize, they could have something like a Fatal Push and kill my Shredder, kill my Shadow, and so I'm not presenting lethal anymore. Because it would be a 7/7 Shadow and a 4/6 Murktide, or 4/6 Ledger Shredder for lethal. But if they have like a Fatal Push, it stops that. So I'm going to be like a little bit conservative with my life total and go for the Thoughtseize instead, just to fetch basic Thoughtseize. Because if I see that the coast is clear, I can still fetch and shock off this polluted delta and present lethal. So we see creativity, a couple, what's it called, and a pierce. And now that we know the coast is clear, we can go for the lethal. It also helps to gain a little bit of information. Maybe they're playing some off-the-wall card that I didn't know about, and I'm just setting myself to not have to take a bunch of extra damage if I don't need to. So, on to game 2. Sideboarding against creativity. All those counter spells we talked about earlier are coming in. The 2 Flusterstorm, 3 Spell Pierce. Spell Pierce especially is fantastic in this matchup. Like stopping turn 2 Wrenn and 6, turn 3 Teferi or Fable of the Mirror Breaker, turn 4 creativity, turn 5 creativity, Prismari commands early, anything like that. Super, super good. Stops Fire and Ice. If you have like double 1 mana counter spells, you can counter a ice on a land and then like also hit a creativity or fable or something on their turn. Board out a bunch of Ragavans on the draw, like Bolt, Unholy Heat, Renin 6, Fire and Ice. Pretty dead. Couple Unholy Heat, couple Bolt, because I'd rather rely on counter spells than the spot removal spells. Board out a Terminate. So like 3, 4, 5 are my counter spells. The 2 Mystical Disputes. And then the Terminate is in over the Alpine Moon is in over the Terminate. Some people will say don't bring in Alpine Moon against creativity. I say it does exactly what you want a tempo card to do, which is like stop your opponent from having this avenue of combo killing you for a couple turns. It's not going to win you the game. It's not going to be like an end-all be-all. But if you just need to buy yourself a turn or two, or you've got like Ragavans or Shadows that you need to connect with, then it's good. But I wouldn't bring it in and say like this automatically beats creativity or anything like that. It's not a very exciting opening hand, but it's tough to throw back something that's got a threat, it's got a card advantage spell, it's got a way of interacting with the creativity. It's very much on the lower end of keepable. But creativity also does play a bunch of like fetch lands and stuff, so maybe we get a chance to snag something just because they fetched a lot. Like if they go fetch, turn 3, fetch, fable, then I can just like cleanly drown and lock that, and that's pretty good for me. Here, I'm going to play out 1 shadow and hold up drown. The reason being is if they use like a bolt or something to kill the shadow, it does add another card to their graveyard, makes drown better. Then them doing nothing makes me assume that they've just got a whole bunch of like what's it called, Veil of Summers and stuff in hand. I'm not fighting over this the kill spell on the shadow because I want to not die to an indomitable creativity. The shadow's replaceable. Like I've got expressive iteration, I've got draw steps. I can find another threat. What I can't find is a way to get out of it if they resolve a creativity. Then opponent missed their last land drop. I could cast the Thoughtseize, but if I cast the Thoughtseize and they have a counter spell, I'm not fighting over that counter anyway, because then I just run into the issue of, all right, they fetch on their turn in creativity. So instead, I'd rather just like take my threat, let them have their turn, have a couple counter spells up. Like if I Thoughtseize and they Veil of Summer, that's horrific for me. But if I go to my turn and like get down Shadow, have double Drown in the Lock plus stuff or plus Flusterstorm up, then I really don't care about Veil of Summer much anymore. And yep, they just go ahead and cycle 1 for the draw. So opponent cycling 1 would lead me to believe that they've got a second one in hand. That's a pretty good card to just be like throwing away for nothing. Doing 8 here because 1, going down to 5 doesn't put me dead to a bolt. I can protect myself from double bolt with like my counter spells. And then if they fetch twice, to like start trying to get tokens or whatever, then Shadow just becomes lethal. So it does put a little bit of pressure on them to be slightly more conservative with their life total. And here I'm expecting another Veil of Summer, which is completely fine because we've got Flusterstorm and they scoop. So we could have untapped, like Drown and Lock the Dwarf token, attack through for lethal, blah, 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 blah. Either way, on to match number 4. Lose the die roll. Oh, this is a wonky match. All right. Again, kind of like functional opening hand. We've got interaction. We've got some card advantage. Dark Slick Shores, double bobbles. I have no idea what that means. Into a Thoughtseize. Like outside of the Luris, like Delver of Secrets piles when Luris started gaining in popularity, I have no idea what's played Dark Slick Shores, Bobble, and Thoughtseize. I think chat was suggesting like Mill, and I was like, Mill's never played Bobble and Thoughtseize. Somebody said Ad Nauseum. Like, if it was Temple double Bobble, I'd be on board with the Ad Nauseum guess. Basic Planes. So, still no clue. Thopter Foundry. That is one I was not prepared for. Me without my Plague Engineers. Spire of Industry. Then Natural Sword of the Meek off the top. So some sort of Thopter Sword deck. Usually white is for like not only the Thopter Sword, but for like Stoneforge and things to go get Sword of the Meek. Urza, Lord High Artificer, goes infinite with Sword of the Meek and Thopter Foundry. If you don't know this combo with Urza, so you play like your Thopter Foundry, your sword, or play like Goblin Engineer stuff to get sword in the yard, Stoneforge to get sword from the deck. And then Urza, when you resolve Urza, it allows you to tap artifacts for blue mana. So you can tap the sword for a blue, use that blue to sack it to Thopter Foundry, make a 1/1, get your sword back untapped, and proceed to make an infinitely large army of Thopters and gain infinite amount of life, because every time you make a Thopter, you gain a life there. So I've got no way of getting Thopter Foundry off the board here in the main. My out is like finding shadow, finding a couple shadows, and like attacking through this. But then we see Portable Hole. Just main phasing a bunch of Thopters. Alright, so we find a shadow. So my thought is like, alright, maybe there's a chance I can get them to attack low, like attack off a bunch of dudes. I get a couple kill spells on some Thopters, get an attack through, maybe find like an Underworld Breach, and then they just have an Ensnaring Bridge. So the game's over. So Ensnaring Bridge works with the Thopter Sword combo, because if you have like Urza or something and you make an infinite number of Thopters, you just draw for the turn, play out your combat step, attack with all your 1/1 flyers because you have one card in hand, then post combat, play your card, your opponent can't attack. And it's pretty good like that. So against like a Thopter Sword opponent, most of my board ins and outs, boarding out like some Ragavan because it's not doing anything into Thopters. Spell Pierces, Mystical Dispute to help fight over Thopter Foundry. Board out like a couple of the spot removal spells, a Terminate and Unholy Heat because things are going pretty late. I thought about Alpine Moon because if my opponent is playing an Artifact Matters deck at all, they might be playing Urza's Saga. But I don't know if Thopter Sword plays Urza's Saga because like you want more mana for Thopter Foundry. So I kind of decided against that and like Dress Down and stuff, since Dress Down doesn't stop them from making a whole bunch of Thopters. And brought in like Colligan's Command, Spell Pierces, blah, 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 that stuff. Opening hand was like 6 lands or something, so we'll keep the Ragavan Darcy opener instead. Now, I should have just played out the Bauble here to give myself an extra chance at drawing the second land. I would have milled over the Expressive Iteration, drawn the Spell Pierce, then been one card deeper. Pithing Needle. So I have no idea why Pithing Needle's in their deck unless they're naming EE. Then they play Lantern of Insight, and I am beyond confused. Like, why is a Thopter Sword deck playing Lantern of Insight? And they also have no black mana so far this game. Reveal Codex Shredder off the top. Pyxis of Pandemonium. So I'm just like, what the hell is going on? Did my opponent just sideboard Juke into Lantern? Like, that seems really odd to have a main deck that's weak to Artifact Hate and then sideboard Juke into a deck that's weak to Artifact Hate. Like, what's going on there? So I've got like nothing really to do. There's the Ensnaring Bridge again. Codex Shredder, Pithing Needle named Bauble off the top of my library. So of course, we should find a second Bauble. You can't tell me Magic Online's not rigged. They named Bauble for the Bauble on top. We see a second Bauble. They've got Lantern, Academy Ruins. I think we saw Academy Ruins game 1, but either way, now I'm just okay. I don't have the slightest clue what's going on. We are so far behind. We're not hitting lands. Our opponents are milling over our lands. Like, we are dead in the water. There's a Whir of Invention. So we're scooping it up here for sure. Luckily, my opponent was nice enough to come over into chat, and this is where it pays to have _TTV at the end of your name because people know you're streaming and come say, hey. And every single person that has seen that and come over to the chat and said, hey, has been extremely nice. And I love that. But either way, opponent came over and said, hey, and I was like, you got to tell me what's going on. I was so confused that entire match. Like, I had no idea what was going on. And my opponent goes, oh, yeah, I'm playing Lantern Control with 2 copies of Thopter Foundry and 1 Sword of the Meek. So game 1, he just saw the Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek nuts. And that screwed over the entire thing. Like, I was dead set on, oh, this is like a Thopter Sword deck because he happened to see the Thopter Foundry and the Sword of the Meek in hand. And I thought that was absolutely hysterical. So if I didn't know he was on Thopter Sword, I would have, or if I knew he was on Lantern instead of Thopter Sword. When I went for sideboarding, I would have taken out like all of the Unholy Heats. I left a lot of those in because I was expecting my opponent to have like Stoneforge Mystic and maybe Goblin Engineer or something, Urza. So like I needed interaction for creatures. But if I'd known that they were just on Lantern, I would have been bringing in like Alpine Moon, Dress Downs, kept in the Ragavans. I would have brought in Emrakul because Emrakul getting flipped over to a Codex Shredder refills my graveyard, takes my graveyard back out of play, so they can't win through Codex Shredder activations. I would have kept a hand that wasn't like I would have mulled more aggressively for a hand of Dude and Thoughtseize and Shadow or something like that, instead of trying to keep like a fairly reactive hand to stop Thopter Sword. So they completely got us there, 100%. I thought it was absolutely hysterical. And yeah, that's what happens when you assume that your opponent that plays a Thopter Foundry and a Sword of the Meek is on Thopter Sword. All right, so on to match number 5. Good hand on the play. Got Darcy on 1. Got good interaction. If we are against some like unfair combo deck, we can always bolt ourselves to get Shadow online. So if we see like Tron land on 1. So opponent leads Valakut Stoneforge. I don't think I've seen this card get played in a while. It's basically like a pseudo wheel. Like you can pay 3, any number of cards from your hand, and then like draw that many +1. So it just lets you cycle through your deck a little bit. Since they're playing like a flip land or flip card land, I kind of expect it to be something unfair. Maybe a Charbelcher and Oops All Spells, something like that. And our hand is not set up for one of those matchups. I could bolt myself and play the Shadow, but I really don't like doing that if I don't know what I'm up against. And with my opponent playing this Sacred Foundry, I no longer believe that I'm up against Oops All Spells or Charbelcher. I guess technically they could be Charbelcher with like this being their one mountain. All right, so who's going to see this one coming? Everybody who's ever played an aggressive creature deck should know the line that's about to happen to us. Yep. But I think we have to put ourselves in that position because we just can't do anything if we don't. We have nothing going on. So we pass through, wait to see what they target with Ephemerate. We're going to kill that. Alright, so it's a Blood Sun Lotus Field deck. I thought it was pretty ironic because we had just finished like our first league, and our first league started off 3-0, doing really well, and then we ran into Martyr Proc round 4, Mono White Emiria Martyr Proc, and so we're just like, all right, well that's a god awful matchup, like main deck Burnt Forge Tenders, Sanctifier on Vex, Stone Forges of Miria, whatever, Solitude. And I ended up winning game 1 and then punted game 2 had the win, or not necessarily had the win, had myself in a position to have a very, very good shot at winning and kind of threw it. And then game 3, we lost, pretty rough one. And then round 5 ran into Eldrazi Tron with Eldrazi Mimic and Ratchet Bombs and all this stuff. And just like 2 back-to-back god-awful tier matchups. Absolutely horrendous. And then we get to the second league here, and we start off 3-0, and then we run into Thopter Sword, juking into Lantern Control round 4, and I'm like, oh my god, it's happening again. Into round 5, Fury, Solitude, Ephemerate, assuming Solitude, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Lotus Field, Blood Sun that stops our ability to fetch. Like, there's somebody in control of Wizards R&D. Or not R&D, but RNG for matchups. Either way, going into game 2, boarding out just like some spot removal that doesn't kill things without delirium, because I'm expecting my opponent to have like Rest in Peace or something. Board in some Spell Pierces. Boarded in a Terminate because it kills whatever, even through getting bigger. Board out some Drowns because, again, kind of expecting Rest in Peace. But for the most part, I'm just kind of thinking, all right, this is a pretty terrible matchup. Let's just try to be proactive and see if like we can catch our opponent stumbling. So back-to-back portable hole opponents. Thoughtseize. These portable hole, double solitude, Valakut Awakening, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and Rustveil Bridge. So, show of hands from everybody watching this video, who thinks we have a chance in hell of winning this game? I would love to know how many people think we have a chance in hell looking at this hand. So I'm going to take Portable Hole because I want to go ahead and get down Shadow. If they decide to like Solitude, evoke Solitude, or exile Solitude to evoke Solitude, get rid of my Shadow, deal. I'll take it all day. If not, then I'm just going to have a threat on board and start figuring out how I'm going to interact with some of their more expensive stuff. Get a blue source so we can hold up Spell Pierce, red for Lightning Bolt. And at the moment, I'm just thinking, okay, maybe I can get like enough chip damage in to get to double bolt range. Like, what can I do here to incentivize my opponent to not solitude me? And for the most part, it just comes down to like, oh, I think if I don't cast spells or don't fetch or shock or anything, maybe they won't solitude me. So now it's Fury, Exile, Valakut Awakening, Bolt ourselves, and luckily they stacked this incorrectly. They should have let my Bolt resolve and then Solitude. That way I go down to what is it, 6 life, gain back up to 13, and I can't play the Shadow or can't play a new Shadow. But because they solituded with the Bolt on the stack, the Bolt's actually going to resolve after the Solitude, take me back down below 13 life. So if I find another Shadow, I can play it out. got Spell Pierce up in case they happen to have a what's it called? Ephemerate there. Countering the Blood Sun because I need a 5th land for Gigantha, so. And we'll get basic Swamp in case our opponent has Blood Moon. I don't think they do, but stranger things have happened, so. Boom, try to blow up our steam vents. So we're just going to take the opportunity to bolt them in the face. Hold up, dress down, in case they had like a pitch elemental or something. Or I don't know what they would have for 2 mana, but either way, somehow win the game against the Double Solitude, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Valakut. I don't think I changed much for sideboarding. Yeah, same sideboard game 3. It's not pretty, but like Ragavan into Darcy Thoughtseize has got to count for something. So they're gonna ephemerate the Solitude. I'm actually really happy to have them ephemerate a Solitude here and just like go ahead and get the ephemerate out of board or out of hand. I know that they can ephemerate this Darcy, but I really need to like fix my draws here and try to find some stuff. So if they do ephemerate, I'm kind of okay with that just to get the surveil there. So they've got a Capricious Hellraiser in hand and an Unknown. Now they're down to a Lotus Field. There's always the chance that I can top deck and... Or I didn't bring in Alpine Moon. Never mind. Should have brought in Alpine Moon and Lotus Field. Not really sure why I didn't. All right, so basic planes. Most of their pitch elementals cost 5, so I might have a turn here to like get off expressive iteration. Pretty good find there. Like that's one of those ones you want to take all 3 cards so badly. Like give me the Bolt for the Solitude, the Shadow, and the fetch land to enable the Shadow, and I feel like I'm in a good spot. But we don't get it, so we're just gonna have to take our Bolt to free up Ragavan. All right. So we're just gonna Thoughtseize, hold up Underworld Breach for next turn. We take a Fable, they top deck a Fable. You know how it is. All right, so we get Channeler. We're doing Channeler first because if we do that, then we can get like an extra draw off of this this bauble here. We see Cleansing Wildfire off the top of their library. Well, that's not the scariest card in the world, thankfully. So we're just going to go for maximum cards. We find a fetch land, which means we're going to be able to get down Shadow this turn. Sacking Underworld Breach gives us back to Delirium. And they drew the Cleansing Wildfire, ditched it to Fable the Mirror Breaker, drew into a portable hole for our Shadow. So let's see what we can find. Bolt on their upkeep to surveil before my draw step. So hopefully I can find something a little bit better than dash, because if I find something better than bobble, I want to just throw that away. If I don't find something better, then it's kind of whatever. But we'll take Unholy Heat so we can kill off like this flip Kiki. They also only have one card in hand, so they cannot have a land and an elemental. Then I did an Unholy Heat on their turn, so I could wait till my turn and get the Ledger Shredder trigger with the Ragavan, because there's always the chance that they've got like a Lightning Bolt or something and can keep me from killing them. So I want to play optimally so that if they do have that and can stop it, I'm getting the value that I should be getting out of that line. But either way, they scooped the Unholy Heat, somehow end up winning that match. Let's bring the list back over. So some changes I'm interested in making after this league. The main deck actually felt pretty good. So I don't think I have like any major changes to the main I'd want to make. Possibly like I've tried recently cutting the second Watery Grave for a third Blood Crypt, especially in like these Underworld Breach heavy builds. But I do appreciate that this person decided to play the basic island. I think if you're not running Croxa, basic island is just like really, really good to help you out with Blood Moon matchups, which are very popular nowadays. Gives you a lot of percentage points you wouldn't otherwise have. I've seen some people play like basic island in the sideboard. Personally, I think that's like a waste of a sideboard slot, but power to you if that's what you want to do. I don't think the basic mountain is like doing enough that you care. I think basic mountain was really, really good when we were aggressively trying to escape Croaks on turn 4, and you wanted like a less painful way to do that. But I think without Croxa, the number of times that you actually Underworld Breach bolt someone out is very, very low. And usually red mana is not like a big restricting factor to that. But you could always just run, like I said, the third Blood Crypt over the second Watery Grave if you wanted to do that. And probably be fine because you're not actually going down on red sources if you run Island over Mountain and Blood Crypt over second Watery Grave. The sideboard, again, I think with like the uptick in counter spells for me, I don't really need Emrakul, so I'll probably end up cutting that. I really missed engineered explosives, so I think I'm going to cut like the Emrakul and the K command for 2 EE. Really help out with things like Lantern Control. More importantly, like Hammer Time and any random go wide sort of deck that you happen to run into. Still don't think Spell Snare's the answer for me. Alpine Moon maybe comes out. Like, I've thought about Aether Gust a little bit recently, but that's probably kind of what I'm thinking is like 2 EE and then either keep the Alpine Moon or swap it for like an Aether Gust. Nothing crazy. But anyway, I hope this video helps some of your decision making in the future. As always, I'll have the link below for the Discord, the Twitch channel, this deck list. So if you want to check that out, they'll be available. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of their Saturday if you're watching it on Saturday or whatever other day you're watching it on. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. Catch y'all back live on stream on Monday. Adios for now.